right, welcome to the Provoke and Inspire podcast. My name is Ben.
My name is David.
And to my... Wait, you already introduced yourself. I was going to say to my left. That just shows you how...
You can do it again. I don't care. Just
to my left is David. And this is an unusual podcast because we have no guests. We have a blank monitor in front of us, but our hearts are full, and we anticipate that this might be a little better.
I always prefer it when there's no guests. And also, there's no Luke. You know why?
Why?
Well, apparently Nigel told me that there's like the grand season finale of The Bachelor.
Grand season finale.
And he always enjoys, we were talking about on Netflix, everyone has their own kind of thing they watch. And apparently The Bachelor is a not miss for Luke. And I'm thinking, is it really appropriate
What language are you speaking?
So I'm saying, those of you out there, don't judge Luke, because he likes The Bachelor.
No. Luke's into this new show that I've been seeing promotion for called Flirty Dancing. And it's where...
Is it Flirty Dancing?
Yeah, I'm not kidding. It's being promoted. The reason I know people...
Why?
For two reasons. One, I'm not yet on my media fast. Two, it's frequently promoted during football games. I'm not kidding.
Flirty Dancing.
Yeah, and the whole premise is that two strangers meet each other for the first time and do no talking, only dance. And from this, romance shall blossom. Flirty Dancing.
Well, that's kind of how Kippy found out that he was in puberty.
Yeah.
Was during that.
That's true. A man's journey through dance.
And we don't judge Luke because he likes The Bachelor, whatever that. I've never seen that.
Flirty Dancing.
Oh, he's that?
Yeah. Anyway, welcome to the Provoke and Inspire podcast. Calling followers of Jesus to radical faith outside of the church. Would you rate and/or review this podcast? Would you do that for us? That would make us feel good. That would
especially now. I mean, during this time,
festive season. And speaking of this festive season, I want to give you guys a free tip. Just a free tip to bring you into the new year.
I think you should charge them.
Well, no, whatever. Ironically, I won't. And here's why. Now, at this time of the year, we're all trying to be positive. We're all trying to be festive.
Right.
And then you get those things on your phone. Those random numbers appear.
You mean those guys that are like saying, "Hey, your mother
yeah."
needs help,"
and now in the magical iPhone world, it's identified them typically as scam likely, so as to warn you ahead of time, but not yesterday. Yesterday, I received such a call, and I was going about my business, minding my own ways,
just trying to
get along
positive.
in this world, and there is a mysterious number, and of course I pick up because who knows what it could be.
And it said scam likely?
No. Like I said it. Pay attention.
I'm trying to, but you're so slow at communicating.
Okay, so you of all people should know the art of padding a story. You're like Samson McPad
What
pants.
Are you going to tell us what you're?
All right, so. This number appears. I'm concerned. I pick it up, and there is a very serious message that brought a lot of fear to my heart, and it said that my social security number was at risk.
At risk? What does that mean?
So what did I do? I dropped.
Like it's on drugs?
Yeah. I dropped everything, of course, immediately because I have to recover my financial integrity. And so,
right.
Okay, so it gave me the option to press 1 if I wanted to rectify the situation immediately.
Right.
And ladies and gentlemen, I pressed 1.
Oh, cool.
And this is what happened.
Social Security Administration, how can I help you?
Well, I got this very concerning message about my social security number.
All right, and what was the message was about?
Well, it said that my numbers had been compromised.
All right, first of all, may I have your first and your last name in order to pull up your file from our system?
Yes, my name is Reginald Legarius Fenord Johnson. Johnson. That's one Johnson.
Okay, what is your first name?
Reginald.
What is it?
Reginald. Reginald.
Can you spell that for me, please?
Yes. T-A-R-O-L-D.
Oh, good. to know. All right. Now, can you make a hold for a moment while I'm checking your file?
Hold what? I'm in a car driving.
Hold the line.
The line?
Yes.
I have to keep my hands on 10 and 2 so as I don't crash.
Your name is Benjamin Allen Pierce.
Excuse me? I'm a man.
Your name is...
I am
Benjamin.
Sir, I am a man.
Benjamin. I'm saying your name is Benjamin Allen Pierce.
Well, I have never been so offended to be called with such a feminine name. I'm a man. My name is Reginald.
Benjamin is a male name.
What? And that sounds like a lady that I know from the tea shop. That's not cool.
Benjamin. Sounds like a lady name?
Excuse me, young man. I don't know who you're talking to. I can't hold no line. And on top of that, my name's Reginald.
So there you have it.
Wow, that was amazing.
A little Christmas tip.
So then this is what our listeners should do when they get one of these scam calls.
Yeah, in the spirit of Christmas, I think you should occupy just a few minutes of the scammer's time to remind them that love is a circle and round it shall go.
And you know what would be cool is if some of our listeners would do this and then send us the recording so we can play it.
Yeah.
So,
It's actually quite fitting for the topic today because we are going to talk about something that our community member suggested. And so I'll bring that up in a second. But the set list for today, beyond that little random shenanigan, is David's random story. We have a New Year's resolution.
Yes!
And then we are, like I said, going to respond to a community member who gave us a great question about humor. What is the role of humor? Does God have a sense of humor? And how should we look at that? I think it's actually very interesting. So we'll talk about that today. But without any further delay, and that rhymed, and you know it, we have
David's random story.
So anyway, I only spend a few months every year in the U.S. and so it's like always an issue because I have to figure out where to store my car. You know, because I used to have a car when I was here. Used to being the main point. And so I'm always like, where can I store my car? Because I'm gone for
because you have to store your car.
Yeah.
So you're wondering where you should have to store your car because you have to store your car.
Exactly. So I'm thinking, where am I going to store my car? Because
come on.
So
there he is again, Samson
McPants. So there's this church, that we were involved in here, and they said, hey, you can store your car in our parking lot. I thought, wow, that's cool. And actually, Kippy said my dreads are getting on the microphone.
Yeah, well,
sorry.
They got a mind of their own.
So then actually, I thought, cool, it's a church, it'll be great. And they said, yeah, you can put it here where we keep all our gear. So I put it there with full
all our gear? Their gear
all
just in
gear.
a pile in
No,
the
they had
parking lot?
all their snow
just
removing,
amps and cables
snow
and such?
removing stuff. And so I put my car there.
He's a modern day wordsmith.
Apparently what happened is some people from the youth group, I think.
Some youths.
Yeah.
Some reckless
They decided,
youths.
you know what we want to do? We want to do some golfing. And so they thought, we need something to aim the golf balls at.
Well, right. It's hard to aim at nothing.
Right.
You miss 100% of the shots
So they started driving golf balls at the car.
Oh, man.
So they, when I come back, the car is completely smashed.
Yeah,
all
I
the
remember
windows
this.
are broken out. Golf balls in the car, golf balls in the radio.
In the radio.
And so I'm like, no, wait a minute. What is going on? I mean, why would you do that? And then it was at a church. You would think at a church they wouldn't. And I'm wondering why this happened. I'm thinking, is there a moral to this? I think the moral to this random story is if you're going to store your car, make sure that you keep the windows down so when they shoot golf balls at it, it doesn't break the windows.
Wow. And the sad thing is that car was pretty, I don't know.
It was a good car.
It was pretty decrepit in the first place.
What was decrepit about it?
Perhaps they thought that was the purpose of the car. You know, like at those high school football games where they smash it with a hammer?
Yeah. I don't really know what you're talking about, Ben. That car meant a lot to me.
Yeah, the good thing is
and then of course the church didn't do anything. They didn't like, oh, we're sorry.
What were they supposed to do?
Well, maybe they could go, hey, we want to buy you a new Cordoba because of what happened.
Oh, there it comes around again. That's good. You got like 9 phrases, and they circle around.
What do you mean talking
in
about
the speaking vat, and out they come.
But do you think that was right that the church didn't help me out when they smashed my car?
It was a large parking lot, and I'm assuming there was, a no risk situation.
The guy from the church goes, hey, someone like hit golf balls at your car, and I'm like,
how does that even happen?
And I'm like, what are you supposed to say? Are you supposed to say thank you?
I'm trying to imagine the scenario in which a couple of youths are walking along, and they see a crusty car in the corner of a giant parking lot, and then they go, "Hey, Thad,
Thaddeus,
let's go get your dad's golf clubs and come back."
They probably are homeschoolers.
Yeah,
but the thing is, it was a good Toyota. Those never stop running.
All right.
Anyway,
since this is not the used car hour, we're gonna move on.
Okay. Well, anyway, I don't know what to say more than I'm really disappointed about that whole thing, and I'm hoping that I can get some inner healing from it.
Yeah. Well, we'll hope for that. Moving along. All right. So there you have it. David's random story. Interesting as usual. Truthful? Who knows? No, actually, this one is truthful.
It is truthful. You remember my car?
Whoa, you got high pitched there. I am sorry.
Was smashed.
All right, so moving on to the next segment, something I introduced last week was a New Year's resolution. And as we approach 2020, it's the season of self-embetterment. Is that a word? I'll let you decide. Steve is shaking his head no. Kippy's looking ambivalent, probably because he's lost interest.
Self-embetterment?
Yeah. I think people get the gist. The point is, you tend to look at the year that was, and you look at the year to come, and you ask yourself, how can things improve? Now, in all seriousness, I do think that there's something built into us to want to make the most of our lives, to be good stewards of the scarce resource that is time. And of course, nothing is guaranteed to anyone. Now, of course, our culture takes it too far, and it makes accomplishing goals the whole point of life. And of course, that isn't ultimately fulfilling. Whether you accomplish a lot or a little, I don't think that's what defines you. And so last week, we launched kind of this new idea where every week we're gonna talk about good, healthy goals, but with the overarching caveat always that your relationship with Jesus is the most important thing, and productivity and success and ambition in the world's eyes is not going to bring you lasting fulfillment. But with that said, last week I said, kill your TV. And I sort of had this on-air evolution of that New Year's resolution.
Right, but you did, one of the things you said is accept football, and then some of our listeners said, well, there's like 9-hour programs about football.
Yes,
so
but it's
come
not...
on, Ben, was that really a legitimate New Year resolution?
Yeah, but I was also reading...
With the football caveat.
Look, it's not the letter of the law, it's the spirit of the law. And I was just, in all seriousness, I was reading, where Jesus talks about where, he heals on the Sabbath, and he gives the example of David who, okay, I should not probably compare myself to that situation, but the point is,
what?
Football doesn't count.
About?
It's the heart of it, and the heart of it is to not, the specific thing I was referencing, was ending every night by just watching some mindless TV show, and it was a specific thing that was, I think, a distraction to my sleep, a distraction to my relationship with my wife, and a distraction to my mind in general.
Okay,
and yes,
so are you going to limit your football consumption in any way?
No.
No?
No. It's January. For those that are astute and knowledgeable, it's playoffs, okay? So there's not that much football left in January. There's maybe like 4 or 5 games, and then the Super Bowl in February.
What about like recap videos or what?
No, I don't need any of that. No, that's easy.
Or analysis.
No, I don't need analysis. If the Vikings go deep into the playoffs, sorry that this has turned into the sports hour, and we go to the Super Bowl, yes, I will cave and capitulate, but we'll let that, let that bogue.
I think our listeners need to tell us if this has been as selling.
Hey, we're supposed to move on.
It's like Chad. He was like going, "Oh, I'm fasting,ng," and then he's eating like vegetable smoothies and all these fruit smoothies.
He's basically just
these shakes at wherever.
He's putting like full steak meals into
I know, like going to
smoothie.
Culver's and getting a chocolate shake. I'm fasting.
Yeah, okay, fine. I'm a hypocrite. Now that you've sort of undercut the entire value of this segment,
no, I haven't. I applaud you, Ben.
All right, this week's New Year's resolution is titled, Get out of bed. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, what I want you to do is look at 2020, look at what you normally do in terms of getting up, what your normal get up time is, roll back that clock 30 minutes and use that time to seek God, to be in Scripture. You might already have a routine like this, but why not start an even more intense routine? I think it's easy for any good, healthy thing to become stagnant and ritualistic. And so, of course, the spirit of this is not just to it's not just willpower or discipline, but I think the heart of it is, what would happen if we would seek God for an extra 30 minutes every morning? What would that do in our lives? What would that do with our intimacy and connection to God? I think that, honestly, even though so many people call themselves followers of Jesus and go to church and have sort of all of the cultural attachments that come with it, I think very few people have that consistent discipline of really seeking God. And I think often we wonder why we're powerless outside of the church, why things are stagnant in our own lives. And I think a lot of that is connected to a lack of prayer, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I think what you're saying, Ben, about making it 30 minutes, you're not saying 4 hours.
No, it's a good start.
So I think you're making it something that's pretty doable for most people. And every breakthrough I've ever had in my life has come when I started to seek God in a new way. And so I think, along with what you're saying, it's a commitment. This starting in January, I want to start to seek God in a new way.
Yeah.
Not the way I always have.
Yeah.
And I think, you can kind of think, well, if I do this, it's become legalistic or just ritualistic and all that. But I think there's always going to be discipline in a breakthrough. Mm-hmm. And so it's about your heart. If you do it, if you seek God in a non-religious way, you're really saying, God, I got it. I want to see a breakthrough. That's why I'm getting up 30 minutes earlier. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to, and you can't go, well, because I don't feel like it.
Right.
So I'm only going to do it if I feel like it. I think you need to say, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this commitment. And some days will be great. Some days won't be as good in terms of like how you'll feel connected. But it's the consistency, I think. So I think that's a great New Year resolution.
Yeah, and part of the sort of the scope of it was inspired by Jordan Peterson, because I heard this brilliant 6 minutes on the environment where some guy was like, don't you believe that we could all rally around the environment if we would just, that could be the one thing all of society would agree on? And he was like, no, that's ridiculous. And then he went on this, if Steve was on this podcast, he could do the voice, because I can't do the voice. But he gave this amazing analysis of how we really should be looking at the environment. But all that to say, he said, having a billion goals is ridiculous. You need to refine them. You need to have them within a realistic scope, psychologically speaking. If I say to you, you get up 2 hours earlier.
Right.
Even if 5% of you manage to do that 3 times, less than 1% of you are going to do it. And that makes for half a person, which would be useful to nobody.
Yeah, and again, it's like you don't just decide to bench press 100 kilos. You have to work into it.
Yeah, and that's like 220 pounds for those doing the math.
Sorry, I'm thinking kilos.
Yeah. No, but again, with all of these New Year's resolutions, the heart of it is what matters. And again, not to cop out or be legalistic, because there is this weird paradox with discipline, right? There is a degree of willpower and doing it whether you feel like it or not. And yet, in sort of that pushing through, you don't want to make it like the self-righteous thing. That is the tension.
And it's not that, and it's not to earn God's love or any of that. It's just, I want to see a breakthrough in my spiritual life. I got to go deeper. And so you put these kinds of disciplines into your life, and you don't say forever. You set like for January.
Make it time bound,
Yeah, and then just evaluate things after that. But I'm telling you, if we do that, I'm talking about our community, if we do this, it's going to be, I can't imagine all that God's going to do.
Yeah, and ultimately anything of value requires discipline. If we sort of have this mentality that I'm not going to do anything that feels forced, I'm not going to do anything that requires self-discipline or willpower, then, well, you're going to eat a lot of Cheetos and you're going to watch a lot of Netflix, as you would say.
Yes, but I'll tell you what, Ben, I mean, you're like right now, if we, and I will do this, I'm committing to this, but I'm saying you're putting some pretty high challenges.
Well, again, I'm throwing
with the media thing, and then with this.
Well, and to be honest,
like game changers.
They're also connected too, if you think about it, because for many of you, the challenge with getting up any earlier is you're staying up too late, and a lot of why you're staying up too late is because you're watching some dumb show that, to be honest, you deep down know you could do without. So, for example, I have for a while gotten up pretty early. I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing this one because I already get up at like 5:15, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. But I can't do that unless I go to bed by 9:30.
Yeah, but when you're on tour,
right?
or
whatever. But the point is, none of this.
Like Brian, our friend from Corn, for him, morning is 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah. So I don't think Brian would get it. For him, early is different than. It also depends on your schedule. So we're not saying a time of the day, are we?
I'm making it specific, but again, hear my heart. First of all, you don't have to do all of these. We're going to give several. Pick a few that God puts on your heart. Second of all, this isn't about legalism, but there is going to be discipline, and without discipline, you're not going to do anything extraordinary. So again, maybe make these just for January and pick a few of these and say, okay, I'm going to set the clock back 30 minutes from when I wake up.
Okay.
And I'm going to use that extra time to seek God. Challenge yourself. Document what happens. Let us know in the community. I think that would be really cool.
No, I think it's a great challenge.
Yeah. All right. Sweet. All right, moving on. Something I need to mention that I mention every week is we are part of a larger missions organization called Steiger. We reach and disciple the global youth culture for Jesus, and one of the main ways we do this is through city teams. It's probably one of the most common questions I get, which is, what do you do? How do you connect to churches? What are city teams? And I do think it's really important to understand that we are part of the church, that we are connected to local churches, and that city teams function in a city as specialists at reaching and discipling the global youth culture and partnering with churches to do the same. And so we're not necessarily a church planting organization in that sense. We work with the local church to reach people outside of the church that aren't coming to us looking for answers. And we have a very expansive vision that we believe God has given us to establish 100 of these teams in different urban centers all over the world by 2025. And so we need everyone listening to be involved in one way or another.
Yeah, and the doors are opening. We can't keep up with all of the opportunities.
We have city teams being established literally, I would say in almost every continent in the world, other than maybe Africa right now.
Right.
Who knows? Here in the U.S., all over the place. Some of you need to come to our mission school and come back to the city you're part of and start a city team. Other people, all of you need to be praying for us. Some of you need to be giving financially to make this a possibility, supporting some of our dynamic catalytic leaders in countries around the world where they can't raise support the way we can here.
Right.
Some of you might be called to support some of them.
I would say for sure some of you are called to do that.
So in all ways, everyone listening could be involved in seeing this God-sized vision come to be. And so for more information on that, you can go to steiger.org/ I was going to say SMS, but just go to steiger.org. And you'll find all the info there. So, okay, moving on to moving on to the main topic. We got to go fast here because we got another podcast right after this. The main topic today is actually derived from a comment made by someone on our community page. His name is Sherm Ham.
I like your name, man.
Yeah, dude, that's dope. He wrote, I'm sure you guys get a bunch of ideas and requests.
He's with the Vikings, right?
Yeah, that's CJ Hammond. That's
way
too parochial.
Sorry.
No sense of the broth of
sorry
our audience.
Sorry for all of our Finnish.
Broth is a Gaelic terminology which combines breadth and depth to form broth.
I want to just apologize to all of our Finnish people. I like Pekka.
Yeah. All right, here we go. A good topic would be, does God have a sense of humor? You certainly seem to have a sense of humor, especially David. You all certainly have a sense of humor, especially David, whose stories leave me laughing and shaking my head. All right, so getting serious here, ironically, about humor. David, what do you think? Does God have a sense of humor? I think this sounds like a very basic question that wouldn't have a lot of response to it, but there is some depth here.
Well, I think that everything that you see in the world is a shadow of spiritual reality. So there's this joy, like it says, the joy of the Lord is my strength. I think that humor is a part of God's image. Being made in God's image is that we can have humor.
Yeah.
If you don't see dogs laughing, when's the last time you're like with your Scruffy and he's like just rolling on the floor laughing? Now I know some of you dog lovers go, "Oh, my dog laughs." Whatever.
Anthropomorphism.
Or cats.
Liar.
And cats, like. Oh, cats really...
Is Boots snickering?
Yeah, so I think humor...
Yeah.
I think humor is a thing unique to human beings.
Yeah.
And I think, of course, everything that's positive can be corrupted, and we live in a fallen world. So to answer your question, I think it's part of God. It's part of His creativeness. It's part of the joy of His creation.
Yeah.
And so yes, I do believe that.
Yeah. No, it's funny because I think maybe subconsciously or semi-consciously we can think humor is sort of a secular thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, or that we kind of, secularism seems to be able to claim humor. And for me, of course, I reject that. Like you just said, I think that in its pure and uncorrupted state, humor is from God.
Yeah,
and I think we have this sort of Ned Flanders view of God sometimes outside of the church, where it's stuffy and it looks a certain way, and you have to wear certain clothes and listen to terrible music, and it robs the sort of the joy and essence of what it means to be a follower of Jesus.
When I'm around people who I feel are just cultural Christians or just have a pharisaical attitude about what following God is, there's no humor in it.
Right.
And you know what also is interesting is that if you go to a cult or a sect, one of the things that's common with cults and sects is there's no humor, no laughing. And if you're in a healthy community,
right?
You can, again, we can talk about that more, but there is humor, there is laughing, there is, and like I look at when we're on tour, I think one of the strengths of our band is that we can also be very serious and very intense.
But it can be fun, yeah.
But we also, and that's part of a healthy community.
Yeah, when Mike talks about, for the 10th time, about his experience working at Red Lobster, I laugh inside.
Yeah, well, I laugh for another reason, but then I repent.
Yeah, no, in all seriousness, I think that you look at life and anything I think there are many different things that we don't necessarily see as spiritual, but in reality, like you said, are reflections of who God is. And so food, I think, is a good example of this.
Right.
I don't think it's coincidental that food has so much variety, and there's so much joy in it, and it's really artistic in how we make it and enjoy it. And food could have been this just very perfunctory thing. Again, not to sort of hurt our animal lovers out there, but I don't think a dog views it the same way. I think they know things they like and don't like, but they're not like.
But basically, it's like, give me a bowl of something and I'll eat it.
It's like they'll eat the same giblets for like weeks on end.
I know. I mean, I know a dog that would eat poop. Okay. So, think about that for a minute.
Yeah, that says everything you need to know. But anyway, food, again, sports.
You can edit that out.
Sports, I think, are another thing, like the good, healthy side of competition and the joy that we get out of that as humanity. I think work and challenge, like the right side of that, like we're meant for work. We're meant to accomplish something and work hard, and creativity, of course, art.
Art is an obvious one. Struggle in the right way.
Yeah, in the right way. Which again, that leads an entirely different conversation I was having with a friend of mine about heaven and what we're going to do in the absence of struggle, and that's confusing. Maybe we can ask Steve Bancars about that. But humor.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on that. But
anyway. We're not talking about that right now. Then of course, humor is part of that.
Sure.
Right. It's a good part of what God's created, and you've always said to me, growing up, that anything that is good here, anything that in an uncorrupted version here is just going to be magnified in heaven, is going to be even more. And so, yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I've even been like, when I've been on a prayer walk or something, where I've felt like I'll tell God a joke.
I've never done that, but
I have. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way at all. I don't. But it's just kind of like, isn't this funny? And I feel like God sometimes goes yes and sometimes no. But. But I don't. I think that's what a relationship is.
Yeah,
it's not this.
Of course,
come on.
When you look at nature, it's pretty obvious that God has a sense of humor just looking at some of the ridiculous animals out there,
or people,
I mean,
I'm not going to mention anybody in this room, but
yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's true. The shapes and sizes, the sounds and smells, it all speaks to humor.
Or something.
Yeah, but okay. But it's not so simplistic, right? There is good and bad humor. There is sinful and positive humor. And I think we do need to talk about that a little bit because, as someone who really enjoys that, I also wrestle with the tension. And also, here's maybe a thing I want to bring up first is I lie. Well, I do. But I also struggle with the lie that that almost I feel limited by my beliefs in terms of humor sometimes. And I think that Satan will do that. He'll
I'm not sure what you mean.
What I mean is that I feel like I could be more funny if I wasn't restricted. which I know is a lie. Do you know what I'm saying? Do you not feel that at all? Like,
well,
like sometimes
okay.
you have to, because you have to, I just think
All right,
about
self-censoring.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like my whole life is self-censoring, but I think that's...
Oh, you're not doing that great of a job.
Well, I didn't say I was. I'm trying. It doesn't mean you should hear what I'm censoring.
True. I guess it's all relative to what you want to say.
And I think it's because we are sinful. Our flesh is corrupted.
Right.
So there needs to be a lot of self-censoring going on. People shouldn't just say what they think.
Right.
There's people, I'm honest, I just say what I think. Well, that's just lame. We need to not say what we think, because most of what I think I shouldn't say.
Right.
But I think that, you can have the corrupted side of humor, which is it's coarse, it's irreverent, all the things that are vulgar, all of these things. It's like cheap. It's like
so sugar high.
Yeah, and it takes no creativity really.
Right.
Even if you would say that it's not wrong, which I do think it's wrong.
Right.
But it's the lowest common denominator. It's like telling bathroom jokes.
Right.
There's no true humor in it or art in it. That's why I think a lot of comedy lowers itself to that level, because it's not even hard.
Right.
And it's not that funny either.
Humor is such a funny thing, because I do think that there is a perception that religious people aren't funny, that they're stuffy, that they don't know how to laugh. And I think partially that is true, because I think humor has been kind of relegated to like I said, like a sugar high that, it's kind of a thing of the world. And I think if you start with the idea that humor is of God, that there is even a usefulness to it.
Well, that's what made it difficult for me when I was growing up to want to fully follow Jesus, is the role models I saw of that often were humorless people.
Right.
And they
couldn't laugh. They took themselves too seriously.
Yeah, and I just thought, well, this is attractive. You know what I mean?
Right.
And actually, the closer you come to God, the more joy you have, the more you, in every way, there's life.
Yeah, and I think even in our No Longer Music context, part of the reason why we do some ridiculous things is because, well, first, I think it's a reflection of our personality, as you can see in this podcast too, but also because it's very disarming, because there's something very, I think that I don't know, there's probably psychological studies done on this, but there's something about self-deprecation in the right sense, not like in a self-abasing way, and humor that is probably bonding, acts as like a bonding agent in community, right? Like there's something really, really critical to that.
Well, yeah, I just used that when I was in Colombia recently, talking to this guy in the street in Bogota, and I'm saying, I know it's hard to talk to a guy like me, kind of out of it. I made jokes about myself, and I had to wear these like gloves, these kind of surgical gloves for this thing we were doing on the street. It's kind of weird. Okay. And I'm saying, I'm sorry
for a street outreach.
Yeah, but I'm sorry about these gloves. And basically, because I used humor on myself, it was disarming.
Yeah.
And he laughed, and we were able to have a good conversation. So humor is an important thing, actually. Right. And I think in good communication, not every time, but it's a way of breaking down walls. We use that in our show.
Yeah, and that's what I said. So that being said, there are some parameters, and I think Scripture speaks to that. And again, like the reason why I brought up the idea of the subtle lie that following Jesus restricts your ability to be funny, I think to identify that lie, because the enemy wants to take any truth and pervert it, right? And create a disordered desire in us. And I think I need to reject that lie, because I read, you'll read things in Scripture and you'll just think, oh man, can I say anything? And that's maybe a bit of the challenge with this, because I have a couple of verses here, one that sort of positively makes a case for how we should think and communicate, and one that sort of warns us what we should not do.
Right.
Both from Paul. Philippians 4:8 says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think on such things. And then, of course, Ephesians 5:4 says, but among you, as proper among the saints, there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality or any kind of impurity or of greed, nor should there be obscenity, foolish talking, or crude joking, which are out of character, but rather thanksgiving. And, growing up, I'd read that, and there's the verse about sing hymns and praises and heavenly songs to one another. And as a kid, I would listen to that and go, what?
Yeah.
How does that, and so part of it, I think, is really trusting that there is not only a role for normal communication within the boundaries that God set, but there's actually a pure and healthy and great humor within that paradigm, right?
Yeah, and again, it's not. I think that humor is not godly when it's destructive,
right?
Like I already said. But the best kind of humor is when you mock yourself, because you're not.
Yeah. I think the best kind of humor is creative. It looks at life in a funny way. It kind of points out things that we all struggle with in common and kind of can make light of those things. It's a difficult line to balance because it's so. I think that's what's so hard is that even on this podcast, I think we could admit that it is hard to find that line sometimes. Where is the line between pushing it too much and it bordering on being crass or crude? Where is that line? And I think that there's probably not. The Bible probably didn't give us a definitive thing on that, where it's more of a Holy Spirit thing, and reading things like there should be no foolish talk or obscenity or crude joking. And I think if, like so much of what we say, if we were honest before Jesus, I think he would make it pretty clear if we'd crossed that line and needed to kind of correct our ways.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of the litmus test. Is this something that, and I think you kind of know when you've crossed that line.
And that's what I mean. And it's a little bit like eating junk food.
Yeah.
In my experience, when I kind of cross that line, it feels good in the moment. Like it's funny to be funny and to kind of tear things down and mock people and other.
Right.
But then afterwards, that high wears on, and you feel gross, and it hurts relationships. And I'm sure all of you have been around a group of friends where you're always mocking each other all the time, and there is that little bit of high in the moment, but you feel very insecure. It disconnects the bonds between you. It does not foster trust and genuine relationship. And so it really is like having that junk food. It might feel good for a very brief moment, but ultimately it has devastating consequences in the long run. And I think ultimately what we all want is real community, not just stupid jokes.
Right, I agree with that. And we need to have times when we can encourage each other and say,
right.
But I also don't like it when I'm in groups where it's just like everyone's just, all they do is hug each other and act like they're kumbaya all the time. You know what I mean?
I'm tired of all those hugging groups.
No, but you know what I mean.
Just
it's
leave
like,
me be.
It's just like, oh.
All right, we need to get to part 2 of this discussion because we're running out of time. You ready?
I'm ready.
All this to say, the thing that we do need to consider, there's a whole nother angle. With that in mind, there is a whole nother angle to this conversation, and it's the idea of reverence.
Yeah.
Because there is an entire world out there devoted to Christian humor, right? So you have Christian comedians and Christian memes and websites and different things like that. Something that's been coming to mind or for some reason keeps popping up is even this Instagram page devoted to highlighting when people fail during a worship set, when they hit the wrong note or make a mistake. And, within that larger context, and it'd be great to actually have one of these comedians on or maybe the writers of Babylon Bee or whatever, but where does it go too far? You're making your entire world about mocking Christians and Christian culture, even if it's well, intended and good-hearted. When does it start to cross into irreverence? When does it start to become just critical and tearing people down? Is there a line there? Assuming that we're within this sort of weird Christian comedian culture, well, what is the line on that stuff?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me that's very dangerous because you're going into judging. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And Jesus said, "The way I judge others is the way He's going to judge me."
Right.
And I would not personally get into humor about the church, or Christians or any of that, because to me, I don't know, I just feel like it's not something that is right, if you want my opinion. I think that's, to me, not a place where I'm going to make jokes. And I think it's like the world has enough problems with people who are Jesus followers. And then I think to me, that's super low-hanging fruit to just be the mocker of churches and stuff.
Right.
And I also think there's no fear of God in it. Like in Proverbs 9:10, it says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." And I think that there's a real lack of fear of God today with a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so to me, this is not there's no way I would get into that.
Yeah. It's tough, because I can hear people saying, oh, lighten up. It's self-deprecating. It's good for people to see Christians not taking themselves so seriously. And, I've seen lots of articles on Babylon Bee and stuff. They're pretty funny. And
sure,
it's hard because, again, I think that the starting point is having a high view of God. And a lot of the humor you see, it's one thing, the humor directed at one another, right? That's a conversation that's valid, and you brought up that's probably a risky thing to do, right? It's sort of like passive aggressive criticism. It's veiled in humor, but it's really addressing real things. Anyway. So it starts with a high view of God, and that's, I think, the thing that maybe is harder for me or more egregious for me is the things that you see directed at Scripture or God Himself.
Yeah.
These really trivial memes that you'll see posted that turn Jesus into this pop icon or mock some element of who He is or what He's done. And to me, there is just not enough reverence in the church. And I think that that's a big problem. You see throughout the Old Testament, when people would see the face of God, they would fear for their lives. It says Isaiah was so overcome by his own sinfulness and God's holiness that he couldn't even take it, that he wanted God to depart from him. There's the story in Luke 5:5 where, I'll just read it. They see, I'll just read it. It says, Luke 5:5, Master, Simon replied, we worked hard all last night and didn't catch a thing. But if you say so, I'll lay the nets down. That's when Jesus says, go ahead and do it again, even though it made no sense. In verse 6, it says, and this time their nets were so full of fish that they began to tear. Verse 7 says, a shout for help brought their partners in the other boat, and soon both boats were filled with fish and on the verge of sinking. So when this happens, it says in verse 8, when Simon Peter realized what had happened, he fell to his knees before Jesus and said, oh Lord, please leave me. I'm such a sinful man. And you see this amazing moment where Simon Peter gets a revelation of who God it really is. That He's not some cultural thing. He's not some trite thing, this cute meme. He's the Son of God. He's the creator of the universe. He has all power in His hands. And to even consider to treat Him so irreverently as to use Him as some joke.
I know.
It's just, I think that to me is, I see no room for that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just see no room
I
for
agree.
turning Jesus into some cartoon, some joke. You saw those Jesus is my homeboy thing we talked about in this podcast several years ago.
Yeah.
So to me, if we're going to just start there, I think that just unequivocally shows that you do not have a high view of God. And not having a high view of God affects everything, like A.W. Tozer said. If culture will only rise or fall based on its view of God. And if you have a low view of God, it's going to have a massive impact on your spiritual life. Why would you pray? Why would you take God seriously? Why would you, it just betrays the fact that you have a cultural understanding of Him.
Well, it's like I saw this post on my news feed of a nativity scene where, like, all the shepherds and baby Jesus were bears.
Yeah.
And it's just like, or I was at this Christian retreat center, and then they had on the wall the SpongeBob prayer.
Yeah.
And so I just think, really? But I think that the reason you can have these trivial ideas about Jesus and about God is because Jesus is a subject. And I think that's what was going on with Peter. Jesus was a great teacher. He respected Him, but at the same time, he didn't feel like he couldn't have Jesus with him in his boat.
Yeah, he's like, hey, this is my area.
Yeah, exactly. And so he thought...
He had Jesus in his box.
Yeah. And so Jesus can... Yeah, I can take you out, Jesus.
That's cute that you want me to put my nets down.
Exactly. And he even argued with him. When Jesus said, put down your nets, and he goes, we've been working all night. You don't catch fish during the day. But if you insist... And so there was this kind of negotiating. Jesus is cool, but He's not holy.
Right.
And when he got this revelation of the holiness of Jesus, he not only didn't negotiate anymore, he said, I don't even deserve to be around you.
Yeah.
And I think that's the place we all need to get to.
Yeah.
If we're going to really... And also I think it's interesting there is that's when he heard what his purpose in life was.
Right.
He says, you're not going to catch fish anymore.
Right.
You're going to go
Interesting.
And catch men. And it was when he had a revelation of God's holiness and he fell on his feet and said, depart from me, he was ready to hear. And I think, I got to have that revelation.
Right.
And when I do, there's no way I can make these lame. I'm appalled because I speak in a lot of churches in different places in the world, And I cannot believe, I mean, again, I was in another church and this pastor was wearing a picture of Jesus, like I don't know, it was kind of this cliche idea of what Jesus looks like. And he had a big belly, and he goes, I'm the, this is the fat Jesus. Look how fat his cheeks are. And I'm like,
yikes.
Do you have any idea?
Yeah.
And he was a good guy, but I just don't get this kind of thing.
Yeah, and this is, we could go in a lot of directions here. I mean, I think it's a large part of why we're in this place is just the narrative that we're on as a culture, where we've postmodernism has meant that we've rejected all tradition, all authority. That culture in large has said that we can define and create reality for ourselves. We are the center. Secular humanism says God is dead. I am at the center. And we just don't have a concept of reverence and authority anymore. Personal autonomy and freedom. I am an island. I am responsible to no one. That is the mantra of our secular age. But I think we've adopted that into the church. Whether we've done so knowingly or not is one thing. But we have kind of adopted that. And it's eroded sort of the understanding of ourselves and the universe and God to have the kind of reverence that the Bible talks about. We've lost this idea of authority.
Yeah,
we read about the kings in the Old Testament. We don't understand what the kind of authority is, because we live in an age where you can mock the president. It's no big deal,
right?
Even if he's mock worthy sometimes. But the point is, we have everything's been leveled.
Yeah.
And so it's no wonder that in that climate, the idea of reverence strikes a weird chord in us, because we are kind of growing up in a culture that says, I don't have to be reverent to anybody.
But isn't that because of our view of Jesus, that he is like Peter when he was?
I think it's circular. I think that
because don't you change if you don't when you have that doesn't it come by revelation?
Well, and that is what this passage seems to suggest, right? That even someone like Peter, who had been walking with Jesus, he repeatedly needed to be reminded of the power of God to have a revelation of who he really was.
Yeah.
Right? Repeatedly you see that theme. Like, don't you remember who I am?
Right.
What I was able to do.
Yeah.
They continually need that reminder. So it's not a one-time thing. But I do think that at the heart of a person who's able to mock God, mock his church, mock his people, is a lack of a revelation of the power and holiness of God.
Yeah, that's what I think
and you
too.
need to continue to have that. All the more reason you need to get up 30 minutes earlier and seek him.
Yeah.
Because it's not a one-time thing. And I think the heart is prone to wander, and it gravitates towards irreverence.
Yeah.
It gravitates towards placing itself into the center. And God doesn't just naturally stay there, I don't think. I think we gravitate towards self-worship. And when you put yourself at the center, then you're able to treat everything around you more lightly. And so, I think it does start with a revelation. And then I think you do look at something like the church or other, church culture. And can we, again, it comes back to the purpose of humor. Humor should build community. Humor should create bonds and build relationships. So if it's just a person standing on a stage ripping on all the things that they find foolish about Christian culture, how is it doing any of those things?
Yeah, again, I think that's the line for me anyway. I don't make jokes about, I would never make jokes about Jesus or the church for that reason. I mean, in the church, there's a lot, it's pretty low hanging fruit. I mean, if you want to find someone
to mock, you'll
or
do
be
it. Yeah.
cynical and all that, but I'm not going to do it. And then, Jesus, are you kidding me? I mean, it means I don't get who he is.
Yeah, I don't get it. And again, we kind of need to cap off this conversation. But I will say that I'm sure James talks about the tongue being this untamable thing. And it is hard. And even on this podcast, I'm sure I've said things that I shouldn't have. And I need to repent of that. And this isn't a one-time thing. And so even for those listening that are thinking, wow, you guys say a lot of stuff. I do think that there needs to be overarching humility in this, that it's hard. It's hard to find that line in humor. But I do think that ultimately, believing that, yes, it's good, that God created it, that there is a good version of it that is uncorrupted and actually leads to life like anything else that God has created and that was good. And that ultimately probably finding that line is about having a high view of God and caring about what he thinks more than other people. Because if we're looking at everything through that lens, it's going to cause us to be very cautious about the things that we say. I mean, even look at Matthew 12:36. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak.
Yeah.
Yikes. I mean, I don't know about you, but that's pretty scary, right? words matter. You know, it's not just sticks and stones. Words matter. And you can hear the words of someone that spoke ill of you years later, they're still ringing in your head. So they absolutely matter. And so I think we do need to be cautious because while humor can seem like a light thing, I think that it packs a punch.
Yeah.
All right. Seemingly simple, but ultimately complex conversation about humor. Certainly didn't cover all of it, but I do think it matters. And again, this podcast is about following Jesus faithfully in all of who we are and have been created to be. And I think Christians should be the most joy-filled, most fun in the right sense of the word. People should look at us for our vibrancy in our life and say, man, I want that. And I've actually experienced that. I have. I've had, even in high school, I've had friends who came to Jesus because the life they saw in us and my group of friends, although imperfect, was far more legitimate than the mocking and the biting relationships that they had around them. And so I think that should be a testimony. Even our good, right humor should be a testimony to a fallen world. So, all right.
Yeah,
Rock
I
and roll.
agree.
Good question, Sherm Ham.
Way to go, Ham.
Yeah, launched an entire podcast episode. Really appreciate that. Again, rate and review this podcast. Let people know. I know many of you listen. I've run into you. Not literally. Ooh.
Didn't you literally run into them?
That was spooky.
Spooky.
Tell somebody. Word of the mouth. Word of the mouth is still the best way.
Come on, Gary, you can help us out.
Yeah, come on, Gary. You got to have a friend.
Leon, what's wrong with you guys?
Yeah, dude. Spread the word, man. Nations and menu wide.
Katie.
Menus nationwide. All right. Well, we'll talk to you next time. Peace.